Morning Abotai, Shavua Tov. There are situations on Shabbat that arise that we call pikuach nefesh, which are life-threatening situations, chalila, that occur on Shabbat. And the halacha is that a person must be mechalin Shabbat for life-threatening situations. We learned this out, the Chachamim learned it out from the Pasuk in this past week's parasha, that a person has to keep the laws of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, asher ya'aseh otam ha'adam v'chai b'hem, that a person should keep them and live by them. The Chachamim understood v'chai b'hem v'lo sheyamut b'hem, that he should live by them and not die by them, with the exception of the three cardinal sins: avodah zarah, gilu arayot, and shfichut damim, idolatry, adultery, and murder. All other mitzvot, if it's a situation of a person's life being threatened, the halacha is transgress that mitzvah and stay alive. That's why with regards to Shabbat, the halacha is, it's actually Talmud Yerushalmi that Marana Bet Yosef brings down, also in Shulchan Aruch. He brings down in Shulchan Aruch Siman Shin Kafchet in Orach Chaim. The Talmud Yerushalmi says as follows: that if a person asks, let's say there's a life-threatening situation that happens on Shabbat, and a person's not sure what to do, he goes and asks a question to the Chacham. The Gemara calls him Shofech Damim. That is a person who spills blood, like a murderer. When there's a life-threatening situation, don't ask. Act immediately. No asking. Not only that, the Gemara continues, Hasho'el Shofech Damim, the person who asks is like murdering. V'nish'al harei ze meguneh. The Rav to whom the question was asked is also, it's a bad sign for him also. He's also, we look down at that Rav. Why? He was asked the question. Answer, because the Rav should have told his Keilah many times before that the halacha is, in situations of pikuach nefesh, don't ask, just act. And therefore, if he was asked this question, it bodes ill for him as well. It looks bad for this Rav. That's that. Not only that, the Ramban, in his Sefer Milchemet Hashem, the Ramban says, let's say there's a situation where pikuach nefesh, and a person says he doesn't want to do it himself. He sends other people. He would rather have other people do the Chilul Shabbat instead of him. That's a shoteh. The Ramban says there's no chasidut in that. There's no piety. There's no righteousness in that, because in the situation of pikuach nefesh, the halacha is that we go and be mechalel Shabbat al yedei gdolei Israel. Davka, the greatest sages of Am Yisrael, go to be mechalel Shabbat in order to show that's the halacha. The Elbaz, quoted by the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Shin Kafchet, says sometimes there are situations where, let's say, the patient, the person who is in a situation of pikuach nefesh, says, no, my life isn't worth it. Don't be mechalin Shabbat for me. Right? He's very frum. He's very, very religious. He says, don't be mechalin Shabbat for me. The Elbaz says, we talk to him. We try to convince him that there's no chasidut for that. And at the end, we tell him, we force him. We're not asking you. You're mechalin Shabbat for the person, and explain to him that's called chasidut shel shtut. That's called foolish piety. The Torah says this is what's done. The same Torah that says to keep Shabbat and to keep all of the other mitzvot says that in this situation, you have to be mechalin to Shabbat. You have to stay alive. Where does the term pikuach nefesh come from? What does that mean? Where did that come from? You ever ask yourself, what is pikuach nefesh? What does that mean? The Mishnah at the end of Masechet Yomah discusses that when a person's in a life-threatening situation, you do any melacha in order to save him. Now, one of those things is, if a person, Khalila, was in a rock slide or a structure collapsed on a person, in order to see if he's still alive, mifakechin alav etagal, which means we remove the stones, we remove the rocks or whatever it is, in order to pull him out, to extricate him from the rubble to save his life. Mifakechin etagal, you take off the pile. What is that? From there, the Chachamim derived this term, pikuach nefesh, removing the rocks in order to see if he's still alive. Therefore, we use that as a colloquial, we use that as the term for any situation where a person's life is in danger. We call it based on that pikuach nefesh. Obviously, that's not the only melacha we do. We'll continue with Zat Hashem in the following days. Have a wonderful day.